Call the council meeting to order, and that we have possibly third item to add in the in-camera section about identifiable individual involving the William Police Services. Other than that, do I have a motion to accept the agenda? Councillor Vaughn and Councillor Hallahan. All in favor? Carried. Declaration of pecuniary interest, if any. None noted. For the Reeves report, it was very nice coming back into Blythe yesterday at 5 o'clock to see 2 blocks in all directions from the theater completely filled. A very well attended concert yesterday afternoon in the theater. Another thing that's going on this week is the Wingham Silver Stick Midget Tournament. The official opening is Friday, but the games are all week leading up to it. Great hockey for those that enjoy it and can get to it. Also this week, there's a G2G rail to trail meeting at the Blythe Community Center on Thursday night for all those that can make it and have opinions on how basically the trail portion that North Huron already does work on fits into that, as well as through a bit more of the countryside. Also, this week, on Thursday night, also the Huron Soil and Crop Improvement Association annual meeting is in the Holmesville Hall. But on Friday, their guest speaker will still be around, and that's Odette Menard, that was inducted into the Canadian Soil and Water Conservation Hall of Fame back in 2005. For people that want to look at soil and water conservation, it would be an excellent forum, and pre-registrations are required. For anybody that's interested, get a hold of me after the meeting, and I will give you contacts for that. So, moving on to reading of the minutes of the previous meeting, November 4th. Deputy Reeves and Councillor McGowan. Any questions? All in favor? Carried. Okay, Gary, I'll let you introduce the first deputation.
Okay, thank you, Reeve. We have, first up, we have Marie Wilson and Dylan Lahowie from the Nuclear Waste Management Organization.
Okay. Good evening, Reeve, Vincent, and members of council, staff, media, and members of the public health. My name is Marie Wilson, and I work in public engagement for OPG's proposed geologic repository project for low and intermediate level waste. And I do this work on behalf of the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, a separate company that is under contract to OPG to provide technical services and communication services through the regulatory approvals process. Also with me this evening, I have Dylan Lahowie, who is a senior engineer. Dylan has site-specific experience working with the geoscientific site characterization, which was done for the geology in support of the environmental assessment. So Dylan is our technical expert tonight, and he's going to answer any technical questions. He will also be discussing why the geology will safely isolate and contain the low and intermediate level waste. Now, we both work at the Bruce Nuclear site. I live in the village of Tiverton, which I'm sure hopefully everybody knows. Been there since 1986. Prior to working with, or going to OPG to work on this project in 2005, I had quite a lengthy career with the Kincardine News, which thoroughly enjoyed and loved, but it's been a new challenge working on this project. Dylan actually lives in Wingham, and he's one of your constituents, who are with his wife and his 6-year-old son. And it was Dylan that heard you had been discussing the Deep Geologic Repository at Council and that you were looking for more information about it. So he came to me, and we were really pleased to be able to come and provide you with information about this project. So there's a lot of information, and we have limited time, so I'm going to provide a very high-level overview and let you know where we are in the regulatory approvals process. And then Dylan's going to talk specifically about some of the geoscience investigations that have been done. And we'll both be more than willing to answer any of your questions at the end of the presentation. Okay, so first of all, when we're talking about nuclear waste, it's very important to understand the different categories. And so there are 3 types of categories of nuclear waste. One of the most important facts that I want you to really come away from this presentation tonight is the fact that used nuclear fuel bundles will not be accommodated in this project. OPG's DGR is strictly for low and intermediate level waste. So when we're talking about low level waste, we are talking about items that are used routinely in cleanup and maintenance at the generating station, items such as mop heads, cloths, paper towels, protective clothing. Much of these items are incinerated to reduce the volume, but that does not reduce the radioactivity. So a lot of what's going into the Deep Geologic Repository in terms of low-level waste will be ashes in stackable containers. Low-level waste has mild levels of contamination, and you can see that the worker in the upper photograph is handling a bag of radioactive waste. She is not wearing any protective equipment that would be used specifically for radiation protection. What she's wearing is just the normal things that you'd wear in an industrial setting. Now that is not the same when it comes to intermediate level waste, and let's be very, very clear on this point. Intermediate level waste is much different from low level waste. It has much higher levels of radioactivity, much longer lasting radionuclides, and you do require shielding with intermediate level waste. So specific examples of this waste would be ion exchange, resin beads, filters. These are used in the reactor water systems to keep them clean. Also, you've probably heard of the refurbishment of units 1 and 2 at Bruce Power. All of that waste that came out of there, irradiated core components, very high levels of radioactivity. Must be shielded, must be safely isolated and contained from human contact and from the environment. Shielding is required. Again, used nuclear fuel, that is the used nuclear fuel bundles. That is not what we are talking about when we're talking about this project. Simply low and intermediate level waste. Okay? So this is a picture of OPG's Western Waste Management Facility located at the Bruce Nuclear Site, which is in the municipality of Kincardine. This is an interim management facility, and it has been accepting all of the low and intermediate level waste from both Pickering and Darlington generating stations, as well as those at the Bruce Nuclear Site. And this is a practice which has been ongoing for over 40 years. So when I talked about low-level waste is managed in these storage buildings right here. They're like concrete warehouse-type structures. Intermediate level waste is managed in ground containers just beneath the surface, and you can see some of them right here. Now the refurbishment waste that I was talking about, the irradiated core components are in this building right here, and they are in special containers for shielding, and then they go into that building. The building directly in front contains 16 steam generators, and you may have heard some of the discussion in the media about these steam generators about 2010. They are safely tucked into that building. So the proposal is to take the waste that is currently managed in this facility, the low and intermediate, and go from interim to permanent storage in a deep geologic repository which could be situated in this area an OPG-owned and retained land. So that is the proposal that we are currently going through a regulatory approvals process for, and that process is not finished. There's still a ways to go, although we have come through a very important milestone recently, the public hearing, and I'll talk a little bit about that, and then Dylan will finish off with that. Okay? So first of all, I wanted to talk a little bit about transportation because I understand that's an issue of special interest to this group. So as I mentioned, OPG has been transporting low and intermediate level waste for over 40 years. When you look at the big picture, there are about 1,000 shipments of radioactive materials across Canada each year. Much of this would be medical waste, some of it would be mining waste. OPG accounts for about 800 radioactive shipments. OPG complies with all legislation and regulations governing the transportations of radioactive materials. And there are two bodies that really provide governance for this, and that would be Transport Canada with the Federal Transportation of Dangerous Goods Regulations Act. So for instance, they have the requirements for disclosure. You must disclose on your shipping label what kind of materials you are shipping. They specify the requirements for the placarding and the labeling of not only the vehicle but the packages as well. They specify the requirements for our drivers, what kind of training they must have. Also, they must approve a transportation emergency response plan in the event that there is an emergency situation. Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, Canada's nuclear regulator, they specify the standards for the packaging, which are very robust for the radioactive materials that are being shipped up. So they specify those requirements. And OPG has a very good track record with the transportation of these materials. In over 40 years, there has not been any release of radioactive materials. With respect to our drivers, they are extremely skilled and well-trained. They do all kinds of training with respect to defensive driving, skid school, load procurement. They have to go through an independent evaluation every 2 years by a driving company. They also are trained in radiation protection, so very, very well-trained people. Equipment procedures, very robust. We have a high frequency of vehicle replacement, quarterly annual maintenance per the regulations. This would also apply to the packaging as well, not just the vehicle. There is a 24/7 transportation emergency response team available and very, as you can imagine, detailed emergency preparedness procedures. Given the length of time that the materials have been shipped from Darlington and Pickering, there has been a lot of work done with first responders from municipalities that are within close proximity to the routes. So, for example, Teeswater, Walkerton, Harrison Mutual Aid, Bruce County Mutual Aid, Orangeville, Peel Region, Durham Region, Toronto. They've received presentations, and this is a program which has been in place for many years, and it is ongoing to make sure that these people are aware that we are transporting these materials and that there is an emergency response plan in place. Okay. So getting back to the DGR project, in terms of the overview, again, we're going to take the waste, which is currently managed on an interim basis, and pending regulatory approval, it would be placed into a long-term permanent solution 680 meters beneath the surface. And I'm not going to spend much time on the actual geology because that's Dylan's area and he's much better at discussing that than I am. But I do want to talk a little bit about the capacity. 200,000 cubic meters of low and intermediate level waste. This really translates into all of the waste generated by OPG's 20 reactors as well as refurbishment waste. But I also want to make it very clear that decommissioning waste, which is the waste that you would receive once a decision is made to dismantle the reactors, can also be accommodated in this facility. That is an activity which is not expected to take place for several decades. At the time, then when it does take place, if the capacity is not enough in the current plan, then the DGR could be expanded, but you would have to go through the regulatory approvals that are in place for that time period. But I do want to make it clear at this point in time, OPG's license application, which is currently going through the process, is for 200,000 cubic meters of low and intermediate level waste. And again, just to, I don't want to be boring, but this will not accommodate used nuclear fuel bundles. It's just for the low and intermediate. So here you can see the surface facilities. Here's the existing Western Waste Management Facility, the main shaft head frame, ventilation shaft head frame. There'll be an amenities building for employees, also a waste receiving building. These surface facilities will take up about 30 hectares, 74 acres. Moving to the underground, you can see a little bit better what the emplacement rooms will look like. There's 31. They're approximately 250 meters in length, 7 meters high, and about 8.5 meters wide. The main shaft will facilitate the movement of personnel and waste packages, as well as provide for the fresh air coming into the facility. During construction, pending, if we get approval for this, the waste rock would come out through the ventilation shaft. The ventilation shaft would also provide for exhaust air, and also in the event of an emergency, you have a second access for people to exit by. In the upper corner, we have what would look like typical low-level waste emplacement rooms, stackable containers of low-level waste. This is an intermediate level waste package being unloaded with a gantry crane, and it's on a self-propelled rail cart. And the amount of area that this would take up would be about 40 hectares or 99 acres. Okay? So you might ask the question, why is a deep geologic repository necessary? And you have to go back to what the actual components of the low and intermediate level waste are. And this is because of the components of the waste, you need a long-term solution that can safely isolate and contain the waste. Most of the low-level waste, as we discussed, has low levels of radioactivity, will have decayed within 300 years. But a small portion of the intermediate level waste will be active for about 100,000 years. So you need a good long-term management plan for the safe isolation and containment. OPG, also under the federal radioactive waste management policy framework, has accountability and responsibility for a long-term plan for low and intermediate level waste. It's its responsibility to come up with a solution. OPG is proposing, and as their end result, they would like to establish the deep geologic repository on behalf of present and future generations. And we talk about this generation should provide a long-term solution. This was one of several reasons that the municipality of Kincardine, why they initiated discussions early on 2001 to discuss various long-term options, and this was one of the reasons. Also, geologic repositories are internationally accepted best practice for isolating and containing nuclear waste. And I would note that with reactors in 31 countries, the long-term management of nuclear waste is not something that is unique to Canada. There are many countries that are looking at this point in time. Okay? So I'm just going to go over some project milestones very quickly to give you an idea of where we've been and where we're going. So initial approach was made by Kincardine in 2001. 2002, a memorandum of understanding was signed with OPG and Kincardine. Basically set out a work plan to jointly look at the feasibility of various options for long-term management plans at the Bruce nuclear site. So a number of things happened. There was an independent assessment study that included a geotechnical study and other feasibility studies with respect to social and economic impacts. Also, OPG representatives, along with members of Kincardine Council, toured a number of facilities internationally. And part of the reason for the tours to give hands-on experience and to actually tour the facilities themselves and gain additional technical knowledge, but also as this type of facility is very much a social issue, and it gave them an opportunity to speak to some of their municipal counterparts about some of the things involved when you're going down this road to citing a long-term management plan for nuclear waste. 2004, Kincardine Council passed a resolution showing their preference for the deep geologic repository because it provided the highest safety margin of any of the other options. So it was passed at the council table. That was their preferred option. OPG concurred with that. There was a hosting agreement signed in 2004 between Kincardine and OPG, although there are 4 neighboring municipalities are also beneficiaries, and they benefit financially from that hosting agreement. And it's worth about $35 million over 30 years. The project description for the project submitted to the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission in 2005. That initiated the environmental assessment. So following the submission of the project description, there was a series of work programs began. They were very extensive. They went from 2006 to 2010. And the work programs in support of the environmental assessment included the geoscience studies, which I've mentioned. Dylan will talk more about that. Safety assessment, environmental field studies, engineering and design, as well as engagement. And the engagement program actually started pre-environmental assessment. And I know because I was a member of the media around 2003, and we had a lot of conversations with OPG about this project, and there were a number of activities that were taking place. Go to the next slide. The result of all of those work programs is documented in OPG's environmental impact statement, along with there's other supporting documentation, the preliminary safety report, which is key to the license application, and also other supporting documents. The conclusion is there will not be any adverse residual significant effects to either human health or the environment. Now that conclusion of the environmental impact statement was very much the subject of a public comment period that went for 15 months. It started in February 2012, and a panel called the Joint Review Panel called for that comment period. Now the Joint Review Panel consists of 3 highly technical experts, a lot of experience in environmental assessment, as well as a lot of experience in a lot of different disciplines. So they called the public comment period. They've reviewed the documentation. The comment period was also an opportunity for members of the public, federal agencies, First Nations, Métis, NGO groups, many, all of these different groups were participated in the public comment period. There were over 500 information requests, so it's quite lengthy, and all of this information is available on the project registry, which is on the website. So very transparent. All of the documents are on that website, and all of the information requests as well as the answers. So once the Joint Review Panel was satisfied that they had enough information to go to a public hearing, the public hearing was called, and it started on September 16th. We had 25 days of public hearings. 17 of those were in Kincardine, and the rest were in the rest were in Saugeen Shores. It ended on October 30th, and there was a tremendous amount of participation in this very public process. Many interveners, both in writing, some orally, and some both. So it was an opportunity for members of the public, Métis, First Nations communities. There were reports and presentations from independent experts. The proponent provided presentations, Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, but it was a very public process in the sense that anyone who wanted to let their voice or let their views be known to the Joint Review Panel had that opportunity. And then they also had the opportunity to ask questions of different parties involved, the proponent, other speakers, other interveners, or the CNSC through the chair. And all of that material is documented in the daily transcripts, which are now posted to the project registry as well. So a lot of information. There were people who spoke in favor. There were people that spoke against, did not agree with the conclusion of the environmental impact statement. There were people that questioned different components. the engagement work that was done, some of the modeling, methodology. So a lot of different viewpoints, and that's what this type of process is all about, is to make sure that those viewpoints get a thorough public vetting. Now, we're not finished. We've still a long way to go. The Joint Review Panel will ultimately have to go through all of that material. They will prepare a report with a conclusion, a rationale, and a recommendation, which will go to the Federal Minister of Environment. But we're not there yet. There's still a lot more work to be done. Anyway, I'm now going to turn it over to Dylan, who is going to talk about some of the geoscience work that was done at the site.
Okay, so so basically this is a shot showing what the repository would look like underground. We already showed you this, but just a couple of things just to point out. So the Coburg Formation limestone, where this would be, this is about it's a Paleozoic age limestone, so it's about 450 million years old. It's a diffusion-dominated environment. All that just means that the water, that there's no flow of water through this rock. So it's basically it basically immobilizes the waste at that depth. The repository, like Marie said, would be 680 meters deep. The Coburg Formation itself is 27 meters in thickness, and then above that we have 200 meters of, again, very low permeability shale rock that provides an additional barrier to protect the surface from the waste in the repository. And it's a shaft access facility. We already talked about that. So there are 7 major criteria that make this a suitable site for this facility as far as the geology goes. So it's the geology is very predictable. So we have very old, stable, thick rock formations, 34 of them from the surface down to the Precambrian bedrock. And they're very predictable over tens, hundreds of kilometers, and that's very useful to know for us to be able to confidently predict what's down there. There are multiple natural barriers. So the Coburg Formation is a very strong, very low permeability rock that can contain the waste. And then above that, we have additional barriers. So the 200 meters of shale that I mentioned. There are, again, above that level, there are many other low permeability bedrock layers as well. So it's very well isolated from the surface. Diffusion dominated again, so no flow of groundwater. The natural resource potential is low, so there's no oil or gas or salt there. And of course, there's the salt down at Goderich and that sort of thing, but that doesn't extend as far up as the Bruce site. So looking at it into the future, it'd be very unlikely that any people would come and inadvertently drill into that or something looking for resources. Seismically quiet area. We don't get a lot of seismic activity around here. Geomechanically stable, so that's just saying that it would be easy to excavate in this rock. It's a very strong rock, so we would be able to do that very quickly, and have some pictures to show that. And shallow groundwater resources are isolated. So as I was saying before, so we have multiple natural barriers, so groundwater is well protected from, and the surface water is well protected. So this is just a quick one. I was talking about the laterally extensive, the very thick and extensive, horizontally extensive rock formations. So basically, some of these formations actually stretch. This is the Michigan Basin here, so I've got a cross section through it. You can see it goes all the way from Lake Michigan and then all the way across and under. We're just on the eastern side here of the Michigan Basin, so that's that 840 meters of sedimentary rock that we have. Now this one is a bit of a zoomed in again on that eastern side. So we've got the Coburg Formation here, and the repository would be at 680 meters deep. This is all it's stretched vertically, but it's all to scale. So that's the depth of the the maximum depth of the lake itself in the area, about 200 meters deep. And groundwater resources around here generally taken from the top 100 meters or so. I mean, we don't drill deeper than that for water, you know, private wells or municipal wells or whatever, just because as you get deeper, of course, it gets sulfurous and it gets salty, and then so it's not useful. So we're way down into a very, very saline fluid at this depth. Now, I said there's no water flow, and there isn't. So basically, when I'm talking about fluid, I'm talking about pore fluid, so inside the rocks itself. There's water, it doesn't move anywhere, but it's there, and it's very saline water that's on the order of 100, maybe 200 million years old itself. So this is an example of our excavation. So OPG has actually excavated in the Coburg Formation before. This is the same rock that we would be excavating into up here in the top right corner. Now that is, as you can see, this was about 30 meters below Lake Ontario when it was excavated. You can see it's very dry here. They actually had to do dust control because it was very dry, and that's the kind of what we would be expecting to see as well at 680 meters at the Bruce site. And then this is just that's actually an excavation for the Niagara tunnel, hydro tunnel that was completed last year. And then the next one is, so this is just basically showing the same depth. This is the Bruce A intake tunnel, so that's about 30 meters below Lake Huron. And so that's why you can see from this picture, it's definitely a very different environment than what they had at Darlington at the same depth. So this is why we wouldn't want to put this sort of a facility at 30 meters deep at the Bruce site, just because it's obviously a very different, instead of fractured bedrock, it's a very different environment there. But at 680 meters deep, it's dry. So a lot of people contributed to this work over time. Had a lot of universities involved, international guidance, the French and Swiss programs have been involved. So I don't have to spend a long time on this, but it's been a lot of contributions from a lot of different people, different experts. And this one is just showing some of our local data from the drilling that I've been involved in since 2006 at the site, up at the Bruce site there. So we drilled a number of boreholes down, all the way down to the pre-Cambrian bedrock at 40 meters. The repository, again, 680 meters deep. And this is basically just saying the same things that I said before, but in just more scientific language. It's very low permeability rock, isolated from the surface, and diffusion-dominated environment. So. Okay, so basically, this is the last slide here. We have been working on this for a long time, but there's still a lot more to go. So we're going to be continuing engagement activities. First Nations and Métis communities are involved. We'll be doing public engagement like we're doing today. And then we still have the regulatory process that has to be gone through. And Marie mentioned some of this already. So it would be sometime next year probably that we would get a decision on whether or not we'd be able to proceed. So I think that's it. If you have any questions.
Okay, so that was a whirlwind presentation, but I know you're limited in terms of time. So any questions on the material? And I would say, I passed around a sheet, so if you would like to stay updated with what's happening with the project and receive our communication materials, yes, everybody did sign it, great. So we'll get you onto our DGR designated mailing list. But any questions on the presentation?
Oh, Ronnie?
You talked about the training for the, I presume it's the police and the ambulances and the fire.
And firefighters.
And we got as close as Teeswater. Is any of this running up and down our highways and down our main streets in Huron County?
Typically, and I can't go into specific details, but typically, no. And I'm sure you're worried about the Highway 86 corridor, and no, it's not. It's more over towards Bruce County. And
So just to follow up on that, then have you ever approached our police, which are here in Wingham, which obviously will be called out should there be a problem in Teeswater, or we have our fire department, which is state of the art for anywhere. Have you ever engaged them in any of this, or any training, or?
Now, to be fair, to my knowledge, which is limited because OPG operates the transportation program, and I'm not aware whether they have or not, but that's something that what I could do is suggest, if that's something that council thinks would be beneficial, and obviously it sounds like it is, that I would certainly pass that on to the OPG folks. And this is an annual program, so they would just be finishing up, and now they'll be looking for the next round of municipalities. So the timing would be good.
So on the next round of municipalities, just one last question then. Huron County, has anybody talked about this in your, have you been before the
You mean as far as
itself?
the project goes?
Yeah.
Now, so let me talk a little bit about how the engagement went. And we have been to some Huron County gatherings, but I want you to know why we were there and how it happened. The engagement program, engagement efforts were really focused on Bruce County for the most part, but also interested parties. So we have been to many other areas such as Collingwood, Barrie, we've been to Clinton, Godrich, Grand Bend, and we've had very good relationships with those groups. We go to the Katy Agri Fair every year. We've done a lot of work with some of the events in On Sound. But primarily it was originally Bruce County because that was where it was deemed that any potential effects would be within Bruce County. So that's why there was so much work done with the county. But of course, if we have anyone that was interested in the DGR presentation, we went, and then once we established ourselves, we tried to get back to them at least 2 to 3 times, because a project like this over such a long period, the information and the communication materials are changing, periodically, so we need to keep people updated. So we did go to Clinton, as I said, we did go to Godrich, we did go to Grand Bend, and we were in Michigan twice, because one of the first milestones was a scoping hearing in 2006, and almost at least a third, maybe over a third of the people that intervened were from Michigan. So all those people were placed on DGR, on the DGR designated mailing list to make sure they were kept up to date with our materials. But a decision was also made to go and view and provide briefings to some of the staff representatives of politicians, NGO groups, and the Department of Environmental Quality. And then we went back again in 2011 to provide the results of the environmental impact statement. So anyway.
Thank you very much.
But we haven't been to Huron County, and because we've just been through the public hearing where there were a lot of discussion around the engagement. And obviously there were people outside Bruce County that we need to, it would be beneficial to engage with. So we'll be looking at that as we put together an engagement program for 2014, which we're doing right now.
We do appreciate you coming out and sharing this with us.
Okay, thank you.
Steve?
Just a quick question. First of all, thanks for coming. I've been following this for a while. But the question I have, is there any plans or any use to recycle the nuclear waste that we're putting down 2,200 feet in the future? Are you working on plans for alternate uses or alternate?
Well, I'll provide a short answer on that, and then Dylan, if you have anything else that you'd like to add. So first of all, with respect to the low-level waste, there would be no reason to recycle that. A lot of that is ashes. And with respect to the intermediate, my understanding is that applies to most of it. You've probably read some of the information like used nuclear fuel bundles. Some countries do reprocess, but again, this project is not about used nuclear fuel. So the answer to your question is, I'm not aware of any plans, no. And Dylan, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, that's right. I mean, as far as this waste goes, there's no plan to really try and recycle any of this. But where OPG is making a big effort is on the generation side now, because of course waste is still being produced in the station. So they're making a concerted effort, and definitely it's an expectation from the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission that they make an effort to reduce that and to recycle inside the plant at least what they can. So that's definitely going on that side, at the stations where the waste comes from.
Brock?
I realize the time is going on, but I have one quick question. About the person who was shown, the staff member shown handling low-level waste at the beginning. Would that person be wearing the badge that measures accumulated radiation?
Yeah. So,
Anybody that, yes.
yeah, the TLD badges.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, thank you all very much. We appreciate this opportunity to provide you with the information. And if you require any additional information, please feel free to contact us. Gary has our contact information, and I will follow up on the transportation. Okay? Thanks.
thank you, Marie and Denny.
Thank you. Welcome.
Okay,
Okay, next group we have Marty McFadgen, Dean Lloyd, and Cheryl Grace.
Cheryl? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Marie Vincent, Deputy Rage, council people, staff, media, members of the public, thank you very much for having us here this evening. I understand I only have 5 or 6 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you what I had originally put together, which is just a double-sided list of just 13 of the concerns that we've had as a group of residents of Inverhuron about this project. That'll just give you a little bit of a quick reading. Oh, sorry. And then what I thought maybe I'd better do is just focus on 4 or 5. I'm going to have a few more.
Excuse me, just to be clear, your group was getting the same amount of time as the previous group. I think you said
Okay,
5 or 6 minutes.
Okay,
Well,
well, between us, we have 15, correct?
At least.
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
We'll
Well,
give you
I prepared for 5 or 6 minutes, so I'm just going to give you like our concerns 101, and you can tell me where on these sheets you may find some other things that you want to bring up. Anybody else need one of these? Okay, I want to not hand out sheets, but talk to you. So, my name is Marty McFadgen, and I am the chair of the Inverhuron Committee. The Inverhuron Committee is a group of citizens from the hamlet of Inverhuron, which is part of the municipality of Kincardine. And we're a volunteer organization, a group of residents who got together and decided, since we were the closest community, nobody else was going to look much into this project, so we better do it. So a year ago, we incorporated ourselves and decided we would spend however long from here on in to just take a look at this project and see how we felt about it, whether we felt that the information we were given from OPG was adequate, whether there were some holes that we were concerned about. So that's how we've spent our time in the last year. Go ahead, Cheryl. The first of the few things I just want to talk to you about is the need for a political discussion at the provincial, federal, and international levels about nuclear waste. Right now, there are 2 different streams of waste, 2 different groups that are responsible, and nobody's really talking together. So the high-level waste, it really comes under the federal government and NWMO, and the low and intermediate level waste comes under the provincial government jurisdiction and under OPG, but eventually that reports back to the federal government. And they have 2 different ways of approaching how this is going to be handled. The NWMO and the high-level waste group is looking at an adaptive management plan where they go, and they've got 21 communities who've shown some interest. They work through a process of about 8 or 9 stages and come to a conclusion. In the low and intermediate level waste, they look for a willing host. In this case, Kincardine stepped forward, and they said, okay, thank you very much, that's what we'll do. So in looking at the big picture, we really feel that that's not a cohesive approach to nuclear waste, and that all political levels need to be talking together and come up with a constructive framework for how this needs to be handled. And as we can see from some of the reactions from the United States, that the Americans want to be involved in this too, because they have about 27 nuclear plants all along the Great Lakes. And this particular project will set a precedent for the way nuclear waste is handled really all throughout North America. So we would really like to back this up a little bit and start with some of our political elected officials having a discussion and coming up with some kind of policy, a direction, some guidelines, some framework before we kind of jump to the willing host. We think that's kind of the first step that needs to be taken, and so we feel we need to back up a little bit. One of the things in the United States, they have already said that they have made the decision that there will be no permanent storage of nuclear waste on the Great Lakes. And in New York, the federal court decided in August 2012 that nuclear waste should not be buried. So there will be no opportunity for the state of New York to bury nuclear waste. So there, you can see there's a lot of sort of hit and miss kinds of decisions that are being made that need to be rolled together into some kind of a plan. So that's where we're at in terms of the political discussion. Cheryl? Obviously, we feel that there should be a wider engagement of citizens. We felt, as part of a small community that makes up a small section of the municipality of Kincardine, and where a lot of people are semi-permanent residents, we surveyed 300 of our residents, and only 2 people said that one had been called on the phone and one had been sent an information document. And I'm only dealing with what I have back from people who tell me that they didn't feel they were consulted. Not only did they not feel they were consulted, but you can see from the resolutions that are coming from cities all across Ontario and from the states that this needs to be talked to a variety of citizens. The Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, which is a group of 105 mayors all around the Great Lakes, I met with them in June and talked to them about this proposal, and they voted in favor of going forward and looking at this more carefully, and they came and presented to the joint review panel saying that they felt that this was not a strong enough proposal to go forward. So they have spoken. Senators Hopgood, Senator Carl Levin, Senator Debbie Stabenow, who are senators in Michigan, and Congress Representative Sarah Roberts have expressed concern that this project is not a project that's bilateral and needs to be. So resolutions have been passed in Toronto, Oakville, Blue Mountain, Hamilton, London, Mississauga, in Port Carlton, Oregon, and Toledo, Ohio, and in various counties in Michigan, saying that they did not feel they were engaged and that they have actually 2 problems with this project. And it's not about the geology at this point. The 2 problems that all of these groups say they have with the project is A, they have a huge discomfort with it being 1.2 kilometers from Lake Huron, where 40 million people take their drinking water and 21% of the world's fresh water. That's a big issue for everybody. And the other issue they have, which is the next slide, Cheryl, is the location and the site selection. The fact that a small municipality of 11,000 people decided that this is where they wanted to bury nuclear waste is not sufficient for a project of this nature to go forward. It's, of course, the fact that the site selection was not a wider one, where a lot of mayors and council people that I've spoken to in the last year have told me, if you want to build a landfill in your county, the process you have to go through is quite complicated. And now, because a small town stepped forward and said, we'll take your nuclear waste, it's okay. So that is definitely a huge issue for people and for us. And you can see that we started as a small community looking at this project, but very quickly we came to a much wider scope and really understood what many people were saying about concerns they had for the project. Just to note for you that the Joint Review Panel has sent out new questions to OPG, and one of their questions is, according to an environmental assessment, you need to look at several alternative sites, which was obviously not done. So they have sent OPG back to explain why this site is particularly favorable and why other sites were not examined, and to perhaps examine other sites. This is a huge step for us, and we really congratulate the Joint Review Panel for following the really strict environmental assessment process and for looking at the possibility of other sites. The next one, Cheryl, is the hosting agreement. I've given you the question that was used at the very last, I think it's number 13, the very last point on my 2 sheets there. I've given you the question that was put forward by the municipality of Kincardine to its residents. And it doesn't mention nuclear waste, it doesn't mention a vault repository. All it says basically is, would you be in favor of us looking at a long-term management, a long-term solution for the Western Management Center? You know, very honestly, before I had spent several thousand hours on this, if I'd answered my phone, I might have said, okay. So, you know, we feel, and I think a lot of people who have looked at this survey, and certainly during the hearing process, this was brought up over and over and over, that, you know, every kind of a survey needs to have a clear question. There was a very positive-oriented preamble that went into the question, and this is not how we garner support for projects. Obviously, there are a lot of Bruce Power workers who work in Kincardine, and they would be supporting this kind of a project. And I spoke to one of the vice presidents of OPG way last year and said to him, you know, they never asked if you were a Bruce Power employee, and he told me, oh, that's absolutely incorrect. If you do any kind of a survey, you always ask if you're an employee. And I said, well, I'm afraid that didn't happen. So, you know, this whole survey thing has been blemished during our discussions at the hearing, and we have asked for a new public attitude study to be done to really ensure that there actually is some support, because only 4,000 people responded yes, that they were in favor, which was 60% of the people that they surveyed. That's not enough. In a biased survey on a telephone call with no mention of nuclear waste or deep vault repository just doesn't cut it. So that's an issue. And then my last point, because I'm trying to keep my 5 minutes, but maybe you'll have other things you want to talk about. There have been a lot of questions raised during the hearing. A lot of questions that those of us who have concerns are very pleased with. This panel seems to be astute. They seem to be wanting to do a good job. They seem very high level in the questions they've asked. And they have brought in specialists of their own who looked at some of the geology, and the questions have only reinforced our concerns. And let me give you just a couple of examples of some of the things that have been brought out during the hearing by very qualified people. The Ministry of Natural Resources, government department as well, said, and I quote, that OPG should consider a more appropriate conceptual model of solute transport. And OPG said no, it wasn't necessary. They didn't go forward with that. Dr. Wilf Ruland, who is a very credible geologist, said that shale can be a very good barrier to transport of water from the site. But unfortunately, there is no shale at the intermediate bedrock level, so that will not be a good layer of rock to ensure that there's no transport. Dr. Charles Rhodes indicated that once the repository, and it will be closed in 35 years is the plan, and it will not be retrievable. It will be closed and that'll be it. And Dr. Rhodes said it will fill with water, and OPG has agreed that is what will happen. But Dr. Rhodes says that the changes in the pressure from inside the repository and outside the repository will cause the water to come up, and if the seal shaft is not intact after 100,000 years, that water will come up and into the ground. So that has only increased our concern. The Joint Review Panel is concerned that this repository is not modeled after anything really in the world, because there are not repositories that are functioning other than one in the United States in the world. And so OPG has used a computer modeling to ensure that all of this holds together. But the Joint Review Panel has said that there are too many professional judgments as part of the modeling. There is subjective analysis as part of the modeling, and that this is not sufficient information for them. They want substantive data, and they want a review of some of the things that have already been done. So the last thing that they have mentioned, which encourages and heartens us, is there are other ways to dispose of nuclear waste, and they have asked OPG to go back and look at not just the deep repository, the vault system, but to look at the other things that were brought up during an independent study and just review those and see if they are something that should be considered and not a definite statement made on the deep repository at this time. So those were my 5 concerning things. Do you want to let Renee go, and then if you have any other questions, you can certainly.
Thanks. Cheryl, are you going to be my clicker?
Yep.
Cheryl is our clicker. Thank you very much for the time this evening. My name is Renee Lloyd, and I work with Northwatch. And we're a regional group in northeastern Ontario. And I've come to know southwestern Ontario quite well in the last year or so, and then I'm happy to be in Wingman tonight. And our interest as Northwatch is that we have a long history of being studied as a nuclear waste burial location potential site. We also share Lake Huron, northeastern Ontario. Our southern boundary is Manitoulin Island and the North Shore of Lake Huron. So we have an interest in this particular project, not only because it is the first nuclear waste burial proposal to come to the review stage in Canada, this kind of project-specific review stage. We've had a concept review in the 1990s, but also because it's on Lake Huron, which we share. So the repository has a long history. This particular proposal, OPG started studying it back. The earliest documents we have are from the 1990s, but we're not, their research could predate that. We just only have access to documents back to the 1990s. There's been more public information available since the early 2000s. From 2005, when OPG entered this environmental assessment process, to 2011, and if you just want to click a few times, Cheryl, we'll kind of go through a couple, some images as that project evolved from 2005 to 2011. We just took 3 snapshots. We looked at 2005, as originally described when they began the environmental assessment process. 2008, there was a design study prepared by one of their consulting groups that gave a fairly detailed description, and then 2011. But when you look at that project as it evolves over those years, you see a number of changes, and it leaves us with the question of where is the project evolving to? Because in the 25 days of hearing, what if there were several themes, and one of the themes was not decided yet. There was a real pattern in Ontario Power Generation and NWMO responses throughout the hearing to say, well, that will be looked at later. So in the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission licensing process, there are 5 stages. This is the first stage for the first couple of licenses, and what OPG attempted to persuade the panel of through this hearing was that many of the very important technical decisions could be made at a later stage. So we'll approve it now and work out the details later at the operating license stage, which we think is very, very problematic. So, but from 2005 to 2011, we've seen a number of evolutions in really key components like the project size, the footprint, the number of emplacement rooms, the waste categories, the waste volumes, right up to in May of this year, in the environmental impact statement, which is the big binder and it has thousands of pages of supporting documents, over and over again they say this repository is for operating and refurbishment waste. In a hearing we were on for another licensing, for the Pickering licensing, in May, they were supposed to have a decommissioning plan, and they filed a 4-page decommissioning plan, and we questioned a statement that said there was a regional waste management facility for decommissioning waste equal distance to OPG's reactor stations. We said, where is that? And there was some back and forth, and it almost was stated in May that it was the Kincardine proposed deep geological repository. In August, OPG stated on the record in another hearing, in another meeting, but on transcript, that they in fact intended to put the decommissioning waste in this deep geological repository. And Murray confirmed that this evening. That's a really big issue. Over and over again, throughout all the documents leading up into the hearing, this discussion does not include decommissioning waste. A month before the hearing starts, the project does include decommissioning waste. What that means is that it doubles the radiological burden, it doubles the footprint, and it really changes the waste categories. And it really puts the whole question up for grabs, and I think it's symptomatic of the OPG project development. It's an as-we-go approach. So, next slide. So one of our concerns is that the project, the panel as they went into the hearing, when we presented to them, we said one of the problems is, there are two main things we would draw your attention to with this proposal. One is the huge number of uncertainties, but the second is the incomplete nature of the application. But OPG has proceeded, in our view, they have proceeded in part because, you know, they have a volume of waste that they've been bringing from Darlington and Pickering to the Bruce, and so they have a volume of waste in storage there. But we think what might be the greater motivator for Ontario Power Generation is to have a precedent, is to establish the precedent. And we also said to the panel in our opening presentation was that our hypothesis is that OPG is pursuing this as a poster child, as a precedent for nuclear waste burial in Canada. And on the screen you see the 21 different communities that are being studied for high-level waste burial, including 5 in the Bruce, 1 in Huron County, half dozen, another 4 up in the North Shore of Lake Huron, half dozen in Lake Superior Basin, and another half dozen in the Arctic watershed. They're in a different process. They're for fuel waste, and the industry has been seeking social acceptance of that waste burial for decades. So how handy would it be to have a precedent? How handy would it be to have an approval? There's other proposals for a burial of the historic or legacy waste at the Chalk River National Laboratory on the Ottawa River. So for us, this is part of the package. It's a precedent-setting nature. OPG claimed that one of their key messages about the project was that it would rely on best practices and international experience. The reality is that there isn't international experience in the burial of nuclear waste. Certainly not of fuel waste, of low and intermediate level waste. There's some shallow level caverns for storage, long-term storage, and there's one burial for transuranic weapons waste in New Mexico. That's called the Western Isolation Pilot Plant. And we brought an expert, we brought 6 experts, and one of them was an expert in that project, to really outline for the panel the differences between OPG's proposal and the WIP experience, and to sort of pull out some of the lessons learned from WIP, which some of the instruction from the West Isolation Pilot Project is that project evolves, design changes, but also that OPG has not got some of the basic design characteristics that are built into the West Isolation Project that are standard in international practice. So standard, so in a deep geological repository, and there's lots of proposals being brought forward around the world for high-level waste. There's about 13 different countries studying this for the fuel waste. And there's something called the multi-barrier concept. So standard language, sort of standard approach is that you have these multiple barriers of the waste, the container, a packing or a sealing material, and then the rock. That's the multi-barrier. So that's, and in the OPG proposal, We don't have that multivariate. What they talk about is a multiple natural barriers, and it's the layer, so there's the waste in a limestone, unprecedented, no experience internationally with burying any kind of nuclear waste in limestone. So there's the limestone, then there's the shale, then there's the dolostone, which OPG doesn't claim has any barrier, barrier function. And there's shafts into it. And so OPG's presentation, or their argument, rests on 6 boreholes that they've done into that undisturbed site and some computer modeling to make their case that the deep below the surface, it's dry, it's stable, and it will contain the waste. So this isn't like a mine. OPG says, or CNSC at one point said, this is not a difficult mine to build, but it's not a mine. When you're building a mine, you're trying to get things out. In this case, you're trying to put something in and keep it in there for eternity. Very different situation. And some of the challenges in that is the different pathways for those radionuclides to come out from that repository out to the surface. That's typically, you would talk about multiple barriers. OPG is going to rely on a rock barrier in a very disturbed site. And some of the design questions that they still haven't worked out are things like their sealing materials. So really, what they're relying on is the seals that are going to go into those shafts. So you've got 2 shafts going down into a limestone rock layer. And what we're really relying on is those seals to keep those radionuclides in place forever, because OPG hasn't added extra containers. They're not relying on the containers. They're estimating the container lifetime in terms of decades, not millennia, decades. So what we're really relying on is the seals in those shafts, and they're still working on the seals. So we've got a couple of places. So that's the uncertainties with the project are abundant. And where we're at now in the hearing, and Marie mentioned, or it was on the slide that the panel had requested additional information, but Marty referenced a couple of them. The panel has provided 4 more information requests, they're called. These are 4 really large written questions that the panel has sent. So we had 25 days of hearings, and then the panel at the close said, we're going to provide some additional questions, written questions, to Ontario Power Generation when the hearing ends. And we're going to send the first set in early November and a second set the end of November. So we've seen the first set, and there are 4 very large questions. They deal with it's called the significance of residual adverse effects, which means tell us again how you've assessed what the long-term effects of this project are going to be. They also said, tell us again about the geoscientific verification plan, which is that plan that OPG kept saying, we'll look at that question as part of the geoscientific verification plan. We'll figure out how much rock damage there is by inserting the shaft at that time. We'll figure out how the seals work at that time. We'll figure out what the gas generation is at that time. So the panel has said, you better tell us more about that. The DGR expansion plan. So that, I think, leads us back to this very large question of, is this deep geological repository going to be doubled in size and doubled in operating period as per OPG's announcement of August 2013 versus their repeated statements throughout their environmental impact statements. And the last one is the one that Marty referenced, was alternative means risk analysis. And what that means is the panel said to OPG, you better redo that part of your application that looks at alternatives and how you assess them. And they gave very detailed instructions. So really, in effect, what OPG is being required to do is restate their case, is to try again to provide the information the panel needs to actually assess the project. So that's the first set of questions. We're waiting for the next set of questions later this month. So a couple of places to get additional information is the slide if you want to just go back, Cheryl.
Sure.
So we have a brucenuclearwasteburial.ca website, and the next one is the Stop the Great Lakes Nuclear Dump. These are folks based in Kincardine area who are working with municipalities literally around the basin, but particularly in the Lake Huron watershed, to express their concern about this project. And so you can track what other municipalities are doing and the resolutions that are being passed by other municipalities through that website. Next one. So thank you. I have no idea how many minutes that was, and I hope I didn't speak too quickly, and I know I left out at least 15 things, but thank you for your time. And we love questions. And just
Brock?
Thank you very much this has been a very informative evening. Without making any judgment as to which this is the dragon's den you're in, you realize. I would like to ask your help. We've spent over an hour on this topic. It's an important topic, there's no doubt about that. But since I don't see any possible responsibility that we can take to do anything about this, can you help us justify this spending this hour from an agenda that is full of all important things that we can do something about? Could you help us in that regard?
Well, I'll say I came because I was invited.
Yeah.
And I think it's an ever-interesting topic. Who would not want to discuss it? I think that it's of interest to every municipality in Ontario because every municipality could be subject to the transportation of nuclear waste, and every municipality is part of Ontario's electricity planning system. So in that sense, we're all decision makers. We're all part of the decisions that are ultimately made. So whether the municipality has to take particular action, I would leave that fully in your hands.
Can I add something too? I'm Cheryl Grace. I'm a spokesperson for Save Our Saugeen Shores. Our focus in our group originally was the issue of the used fuel DGR that's being contemplated in Saugeen Shores and also in one of your neighbors, Central Huron. And I think,
Actually, 3 of our neighbors.
well, yes, that's true. And I think that given the fact that these two projects are so intertwined, that it is a topic of grave importance for your municipality, even though you're not directly involved in either process. I think we didn't really touch on the transportation issue, but one of the things that I learned that was kind of shocking to me at the hearings is that the transportation of radioactive, low and intermediate level radioactive waste is not monitored or regulated by the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. That's something that is regulated only by the Ontario Ministry of Transportation in Ontario. And there was an article last week about the Toronto Star that I think you just got, that gives you the fairly disturbing details about some of the violations of carriers of radioactive waste. You know, I don't know that you got a direct answer from the NWMO about transportation in your area, but I would think that would be relevant as well.
And if I could just add, in terms of the transportation, there is not a right to know. A community does not. This is something that we explored in detail at an earlier hearing about high-level waste, and the community does not have a right to know in terms of when a nuclear waste shipment is going to come through your community, which I think puts your first responders in a very difficult and potentially very precarious situation. It's something in our region we're very concerned about the first responders who are mostly volunteer forces and don't have a right to know in advance of what shipments are coming through their area.
Other questions? Right?
Just a comment, thank you very much. It's time well spent, so it is, and very informative. Thank you very much for coming.
Bernie?
And I would like to give you a special thanks. I actually did contact you folks, and I appreciate you getting back to me. I'm told you came all the way from North Bay to do this 10 minutes today.
Just from North End.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We will be following your website.
Actually, one thing that I find so interesting is the 200,000 cubic meters. All of a sudden, in the past 4 years, has doubled in size. It isn't the same project that it started out at all, as by your 3 different year maps pointing out a number of the things. And I get the Lucknow paper, and in the past week, Stephen Getz did joint review panel wants more info before OPG DGR decision. And I found the questions that were being asked by the panel members, pardon me, they seem to be the only ones that are really safeguarding the whole system. And that I find it invigorating that there was good members chosen for that panel to bring out the information that needed to be brought out. So that, thank you very much. It's been enlightening, and yes, maybe we were a little too trusting that the panel would do the job all on its own. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. And I have just a couple of pieces I'll just pass you.
Excuse me, what's your name on this?
Got Blair here tonight?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Good evening, Regents and councilors. My name is Beth Blair, and I come from Blythe, so Beth Blair from Blythe. Very interesting evening, I must say, so I'm really glad that I came to join this meeting. My request is going to be very short and sweet. In 2002, there was a bunch of crazy people from the area that decided to do something Halloweenish down the Greenway Trail. And it has just taken off, and every year it seems more and more people decide that they want to come take a look at this, if you like Halloween. So we started in 2002. We have built on it, even extended the area. The last couple of years, we have ran into terrible weather, and it is, of course, it's outdoors. When we start planning in the new year for next year's walk, we would like council to consider if we could use the storage building behind the arena and possibly just some of the area behind the storage building. So that would give us the opportunity in the month of October to set it up and take it down and use some of our equipment that wouldn't get ruined in the rain. So that's basically our request.
Well, thank you. Archie, did you
Just
want?
one question, I guess, the shed that Bev was alluding to, do we have ownership over that shed, or is that some part
We
of
built it.
Thrasher's? We built it.
Pat?
Sorry, I read the letter and I'm hearing your question. I'm just getting two different interpretations. My understanding from reading the letter is you want to use the shed in October.
Yes.
Okay, I heard that you wanted to use it all the time and just in October move stuff in and out.
No.
Just the month of October.
Just the month of October.
Okay.
Is basically what we're looking at, just so we can kind of incorporate and have the walk and use the building and some of the area around it, so that would give us more time to set it up and take it down and keep some of our stuff all equipped. And we decided we wanted to come to council and get there and see if we could get permission first before we started planning, because we didn't want to start planning next year's and then have council say, no, you couldn't use the building. So this was our starting point.
That I think that between Pat and Kelly, it will be as to municipal concerns as to how much of the building is needed.
I spoke to Dave Cook, and he doesn't have a problem with the request. I think it's, we'll try it, see how it goes, and if we need more or less space, we'll work it out.
That it's something that we can work on.
Yeah.
So moved.
Moved by Councilor McGowan and seconded by Councilor Biden. Any discussion?
Just a
Paul?
comment, they're ahead of everybody, they're already starting for next year.
All in favor of the motion?
Perfect.
Carried.
Thank you very
ma'am.
much for your time, and if you haven't been, come.
Thank you. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on to business arising from previous meetings. Do we have anything on point one, the request for crossing guard? Councilors?
Are we investigating that then, putting that in place?
That's the question. I guess
I know there has been some discussion at the staff level about
Yeah.
this request from the school and the parent council. Under either that or speaking.
Well, we met with Alice, and her request is to have a crossing guard, and we've had one previously down in Victoria Street. So, with that and myself, I think that we support it.
Okay, so I make motion to go ahead.
And Councilor Campbell seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried. Moving on to part two, the sidewalk snow removal. Kelly?
Well, I think in my report, you can see that we've addressed the, we didn't have a sidewalk on the one side, and now we have, so we're committed to looking at both sides of that.
That's it. Is that requirement? Or is that just under direction? Under direction to go ahead and do it? Okay, thanks, Kelly. Department reports. Unless there was questions on health and safety. Point two, CAO, all the voting methods. There's a municipal comparison. Do any of the councilors have any comments? Councilor Vaughn.
I would be in favor of accepting the recommendation from Gary. But I think that at the same time, rather than just counting on the technology making the difference, we should think about other ways of promoting, advertising, encouraging people to come out to vote, not just exclusively create a new system.
Okay. Deputy Reed.
Just looking at the voting methods and the municipalities, it would seem that the voting by mail got a higher percentage voter turnout than the telephone and internet, and except in one or two cases. And I wonder if we would be further ahead to look at the voting by mail as opposed to the internet.
Okay. Anything further? Councilor Halligan.
I was voting the traditional way.
Okay.
I think it's got a lot of pride in the vote. I'm not seeing anything about the younger people, but I think just as Stockton, we should be educating people to come and vote.
Okay.
And get voters list, right?
Okay, I talked to 11 different people, and all of them liked the status quo on being able to vote. They said they believed it was the only way to have complete confidence that people weren't watching or able to find out how they might have voted. Suspicion of internet or telephone piracy as to being able to cover certain lines. And that one of the things that sometimes you have to have a real issue. And if there isn't a real issue or a real contest between certain people for that position on council to create the interest, that's one of the things, rather than that basically people, they aren't disinterested, it's they want to know if they're taking the time to vote, that it makes a difference as to how they might vote. Councillor McGowan?
Perhaps it's, part of this process should be stepping back and reassessing the examination of the methods. In that, and I know we really are on a short time frame now, usually a year, but I wondered if it would be prudent. I'm supportive, honestly, of an additional method to hopefully assist in increasing voter turnout. 37% turnout is it's a very low number. And I wonder whether there would be a way that we could survey our residents to ask them what they felt were the biggest impediments and whether or not they would be willing or in favor of having additional methods or change methods of voting. And it doesn't have to be something too complicated. When we could use whether SurveyMonkey and then maybe some additional ways of garnering input from our ratepayers to get a feeling for what they feel is the impediment for them to come out to vote, and whether the methods that we're looking at would assist in increasing that number.
Okay. Good suggestion, Brock.
I think we'd have to have our campaign to have them vote on this survey. It's the same problem as filling out the, responding to the vote itself. But a little later in the evening, I'm going to be reporting on a meeting that I attended this past week on transportation in here in county. And one of the very serious problems that we have with respect to rural transportation is the number of people who don't have a vehicle. And getting out to do many things, including voting, is a very, very difficult thing for a lot of people. And those people are almost always forgotten. And so I think providing people with an alternative way could be very helpful to a lot of people.
Just to follow up what Brock said, I wonder if maybe we should be looking at a different location rather than the Wingham here anyway, from the end of town. If nobody can drive, it's a long, cold walk out there with no sidewalks to the center where it was last year. That's the only place we have it, isn't it?
Really?
Yeah.
Already?
Yeah. Maybe we should go back to the town hall, which is the center of Wingham, so that people can come from all different directions and they can run. Just like they used to walk for their meal.
But that doesn't accommodate the people in the rural communities.
That I know in my years of experience in provincial and federal elections, working them, you always had a phone number that they could get somebody to give them a ride. And that in municipal elections that I have ran, I always put that into my campaign, that if they needed a ride to have something scheduled, that I always put my phone number in, so that I know that some people don't like asking for a ride, but there was usually some people that took me up on it. Dave?
Maybe something else we should do is doing an enumeration, so that we get everybody on the voters list. And by doing an enumeration where you have somebody go around, it would raise awareness that there is an election, number one. And if they had a card left with your voting destination is, or your polling station is, or you will be receiving a self-addressed envelope to mail your ballot in, however we do it, then number one, we know who's on the voting, we get everybody on the voters list, and it's another level of awareness.
Further comments, or?
We need a motion to talk to.
Yeah.
I'm quite willing to, I think initially somebody had mentioned attempting the vote by mail as a trial and see how that goes. And there are a number of municipalities listed, might have been Brock or gentleman mentioning that the numbers were fairly good. So I would make a motion to trial the vote by mail in the next election.
I'll second that.
Discussion on the motion? Brock?
Would this exclude having a regular polling station as well?
Archie?
That was a question I was going to ask the clerk earlier about what the ability is of the municipality to have a hybrid system. Is that possible even?
I think there's all kinds of possibilities. A hybrid model would be one of those options. So there could be, if council decided, they could have one voting location, which would be the municipal office, or just go with vote by mail.
Right, so people would have a choice then.
The way I would see it is that the hybrid, if we went to a mail-in ballot for people that were not listed, that in the status quo system, you can always add people to the list on voting day by declaration.
Right.
And that would be the one thing that I would look at as a possible hybrid. Councilor Bailey?
If somebody sends in a letter and says, I live at 27 John Street, and it's the night of the election, and you go, oh, I guess he must live at, I'm not sure how you verify that
You
some
have
of
to
that
swear and
person-
show ID.
What's that?
You have to swear and show ID.
Oh, so you have to physically
Yes,
come in?
yes.
But I thought he meant about sending the letter. And
No, no.
No, no.
Okay.
No, that,
I mean,
what voters list you have, you can send letters out for them to return the ballot. For ones that were missed would be what I would say would be the hybrid, where they could come in, show proof of identity and residential. Would you be wanting to go with the motion for just the mail, or?
I would be willing to amend the motion to contemplate a hybrid if that's feasible. The clerk would have to look into that further about, I mean, logistically, whether people wanted the choice, if they wanted to physically come in, or they could do the mail-in, and how that logistically would work, or if it'd be possible, or if it'd be a circumstance where they would get mailed out, as His Worship has said, as long as they were on the list. And if they weren't on the list, they could swear an oath and show ID, and then vote, physically come in and vote. So you'll have to come back to us with some ideas, but that's all right, second.
So that's a motion to investigate that. All in favor of the motion? Carried. Okay, to point 3, the code of conduct for members of council. Kathy, you
Okay, I've included in your packages a draft code of conduct for council. We'll entertain any questions or concerns, and if council is happy with the draft, we can pass it by bylaw at the next council meeting.
comments? Brock?
I have several questions. One is point number 5, members shall not accept fees, gifts, hospitality, and so on, with a value limit of $200 as to what could be received. I came across a suggestion at a conference on Friday where when a member of council receives a gift of any value, other than just a boutonniere or something like that, they put them together and they have an annual lottery or draw, a silent auction or some kind of auction where they auction off these things, and the funds go to a charity of some kind. I think $200 is too high. I think that's.
We can adjust that.
I think it should be a lower amount. That's one item. Other people can make their comments too.
Any other comments? Councillor Bailey?
I actually have an issue with the word influence, and I'm going to give examples, and maybe I'm just worrying about nothing as I have been known to do. It says here, without undue influence to any individual member or group of council in 2 different locations. So I'm going to give you examples, and you can tell me if this is influence. So we passed a motion and reduced one of the departments by $129,000, and then 6 months later, I sat down with Gary, Donna, and the director of that, and we went over the numbers, and I wanted to see if we had actually reduced the cost of that we had talked about, the $129,000. And we had that conference. Matter of fact, I sat down with Gary, Donna, and Kathy, and everybody that works for the town at one time or another. We've sat in here, and we've discussed one issue or another. Is that influencing? If I just like Gary to answer this. If I sit down after something's happened and said, okay, I would call it a progress report, but I want to make sure that I'm not going to get caught with influencing.
If you're requesting information from staff, we have an obligation to assist every councillor. Our preference always is that the requests are a consensus of council. But we do get requests from time to time from individual councillors, and we do our very best to respond to those requests. But I don't see it as influence. Ultimately, we take our direction from council, and we'll provide you with information for any questions that you have. But on your own, I don't think that you have influence at a staff meeting. It would have to be a council direction, a council directive in terms of the eventual decision.
Yeah, I am concerned with the follow-up after decision by councils. I think each individual councillor, if they want, should be able to sit down with the people involved and say, we've gone, or we can just waste time at council meetings doing it too. But it's a lot easier during the day, I'm sure, for staff, and just sit there and sit down and say, okay, this is our objective, this is where we're going, are we there yet? And I've done that with, I think, everybody but Kelly's been going off, one one's been allowed for us. And I'm just concerned that somebody's going to come to me saying I'm trying to influence the fact that you need to get to that objective.
Staff appreciate having the opportunity to keep council informed, whether that's on a council basis or individual councillor basis. We appreciate having that opportunity, but we don't see it as influence.
Thank you.
Archie?
I was just going to clarify that I think influence in this context really means that no individual councillor has the right, power, or ability to direct a staff member. That is done collectively by council. And that is what that clause says, so that no individual counselor can go to Pat and say, Pat, you must do this, because I don't have that authority. Neither does, you know, two counselors. It has to be a majority of council to give Gary direction, and also the proper, you know, reporting authority has to be utilized as well. I don't think it means, you know, that going and asking questions, that's part of your job, and seeking information.
The seeking information and the influence, the way I see it, is, well, if I have a friend that I go to Kelly and, well, gosh, can you grade that guy's lane when the grader's going by? That would be asking to try and influence. But if it's a motion of council, it's not, which the main direction is staff answer questions. Okay,
So then I'm gonna ask the hard question, because I didn't get a good one on answering that one, there's no sense asking the hard one. Pre-council, I get my information package, and I would like to sit down with Gary and Gary and one of his directors now, or a director, and sit down and discuss an issue that's gonna come before council. Would you consider that influencing, or would you consider that just me doing my job that I've been elected to do, and that is to seek information, knowledge, before I go into a council meeting? How do you perceive that, Gary?
Well, if you're looking for more information about something that's on the council agenda, again, we want to make sure that you and all of council are making informed decisions. I guess our preference would be that you ask those questions in a public setting so that all councilors can be part of that discussion. But if you're looking for clarification on agenda items, we'll provide information.
Richie?
So I I've read the document. I would agree with Councillor Bodden that the $200 may be a bit high, but actually I thought the document was very well put together and very simple. I know I asked Kathy for the examples that were sent, and some were quite long legalese diatribes, and I think she's boiled it down into a simplified document that covers the areas that council needs to be most concerned about with regards to you know, conduct and utilizing one's station to influence the situation, and the other areas that are covered as well. And I think it's a good document, and you know, although we may need to tweak that one number, I'm wholly supportive of it. Moving it tonight with the amendments once they're decided on and getting on with it.
Do you have a number in mind?
I have to be honest that I agree with Brock. I can't think of anything that I have received, although unless it's slipping my mind, that has ever been anywhere near that. So I'm thinking that you could put it pretty, and I think there was various examples from various municipalities. Some were like $50. Some were even lower, I think, in one instance that I recall. So it really, you can set the number whatever. I don't think that any of us, you know, I mean, we're not the city of Toronto, and some of us will, thank goodness we're not. I don't think we're going to need to worry about substantial gifts, so I'm quite comfortable lowering that number down. And obviously, I think that if something came in that was above the number, then one would be prudent in being a councillor or Reeve or Deputy Reeve to come forward to council and say, you know, not sure how to deal with this, and as Brock said, that might be a good idea, raffling it off for a charity or something.
Well, in personal experience, that a number of, I'll say, things that have been given to me at some conventions, that I have put them into silent auctions in the community and things like that. So the one thing that's probably the most value of anything is some of the meals where I've been invited to speak, and the value of the meal would be probably the most expensive that I've had, but some of them were close to the $50 meal. Rob?
I have a problem with item number 8, communications and media relations. I think that paragraph is too vague, and it's open to many, many interpretations. And it could create a problem. I'm not entirely clear of what the purpose is. I think if we looked at the purpose of that, we might be able to clarify it. It says that members of council will accurately and adequately communicate the attitudes and decisions of council, even if they disagree with a majority decision. One of the possible ways of interpreting that is that if I vote against a certain motion that gets passed, I will be forever forbidden to tell anybody why I voted against it. And I think that's absolutely wrong.
I'll let
I
Archie
guess I
go
would say
first.
that I don't believe that that is the intent of that. I mean, I think what I've seen over the years is that in most cases, councils keep their debates to within the council chambers, and once council makes a majority vote on an issue, that's it. That is not to say that, when one gets approached, one might, say that, look, I wasn't in favor for these reasons, but council's voted and they made a decision, and that's the decision. So I don't see anything in that precludes a councillor from doing that at all.
As long as it's interpreted that way, that would be fine.
I don't think you need to.
On that point, one of the things, and it was at county rather than here, but I voted differently. And what I did was that, yes, it was a recorded vote. Everybody knows that I didn't vote in favor of the majority. So I gave a better person to interview to explain the rationale behind how it passed. And that's one way it can be done, that you aren't speaking against what the council majority stated, and that I think it's a fine line when you have strong opinions over a subject, but it's sometimes very close to going against, depending on what all you say as a member of council after a council vote where a majority has been in favor, that you have to clearly state my own opinion rather than council's, so that maybe muddies the water, but it's something that you look at very closely. And that this is part that really comes out of the Municipal Act, a majority council vote. It doesn't matter the majority, it is the will of council. Brock?
But we've had instances where after a few weeks, we all agree, or most of us agree, that that was a bad decision. Now this would prevent anybody in council from coming up and saying, we need to reconsider that motion because it was wrong for these reasons. And I would be talking against an approved motion of council.
There is the process to bring the subject back. Most of the time, it requires 2/3 of those present wanting to bring it back for further discussion. And that avenue is available. Dave?
I'm in support of this code of conduct, pretty much as written with the exception of the $200. And I'd just like to comment that this is very, very similar to the code of ethics that we work with when we come on to council, and this shouldn't impede anybody from operating as a council member because it's all covered pretty much in the code of ethics.
Brock?
I have another question. Number 11, respect for delegations and fellow members and staff requires that all members show courtesy and not distract from the business of council, and so on. There are times when a delegation or someone making a report to council is a way off base. And does this prevent members of council from questioning and debating? I mean, is it just a matter of being respectful in attitude and manner of speech, or does it absolutely prevent council from making any comment on a delegation?
Archie?
I think it speaks to being respectful in the way that one is addressing the public in manner of speech. That's what we're the guideline is.
I would concur with that. Any other points? None?
Did you guys come up with a number besides the 200?
I don't know whether the meal thing is a big, is that a large concern? I mean, I'd drop it down to $50. I'd be, you know, I'd make a motion to adopt the policy and then drop that number down to $50.
Seconded? And this is to bring it back as a bylaw.
Yes.
All those in favor? Carried. Okay. Number 4, the bad news. Do you want to comment, Donna?
I'm just going to say that we have received our 2014 OMPF allocation notice from the province. We're going to be reduced by $72,800 from 2013. So we're all struggling with our budgets and all the department heads are working on it, so of course this makes it tougher. We expect those reductions to continue through 14 and 15, and the first year we had a reduction was 13. We were down $32,800 in this year's budget, and then they're adding $40,000 to it for 2014 for that total of $72,800. So it's going to make our struggles even that much more difficult, but at least we have the information early on that we can work it into our numbers. And they had announced that to us. We knew that this was going to be a program that till they get to their target in 2016. So again, we'll work on that.
So just to ask a question, Donna, then to find that money within the budget and I know that's difficult to do because it differs across the different wards, but on average, what percentage does that mean in the budget?
It's just
right
less
off the
than,
bat before we even
just
start.
less than 2. Like 1% raises us just over 40,000.
So that's what we have to find even before we start.
So, moving on to 5, Director of Public Works. Any questions for Kevin? Dave?
Yeah, the speed sign on County Road 25, and with regards to a delegation to County Council, I find that a little odd because County Council has approved speed sign or speed reductions in a lot of other communities over the last, or in the year and a half that I was on County Council without a delegation, and why do we need to go with a delegation to County Council to have this same thing approved or looked at? Vincent?
Well, that surprised me because I think by having a resolution, and that I may not be remembering it exactly, but for the county to look at their own speed reduction practices as to all the other municipalities. And I personally have asked for the county highways department to look at the speed reduction zone on Belgrave Road. There's no longer a public school there. I'm not sure that it has to go a little over halfway through that block at the 60 kilometers. So that, but to have 90 kilometers right to the stop sign on the south side of Blythe, there's no uniformity in that, Archie.
So just to get back on point, can we send a message through your worship back to county
Yes.
council asking why we have to make a delegation when we never have, like no other municipality has? If that's the precedent that's been set, I'd be curious as well to know why. I mean, if we have to do it, that's what we'll do, because it definitely
Yeah.
needs a speed reduction. But it is curious.
Yeah.
And that,
If I may answer, when I talked to Mike Alcock, he just said that that would be the best way, because you're asking for a reduction and a change of where the sign is and a flashing light.
yes, so more than
like
the norm.
It's more than just saying, let's change the sign.
Right.
You're asking for more. No.
Put the slate on.
Mhm.
Well, and there's a cost to that, and I'm just the messenger, right? So,
But while I wholeheartly agree that if there's more development around that corner, it should have even a smart stoplight, which would gauge traffic as to how it worked. But I don't think that just putting up the speed reduce zone, those signs aren't going to cost that much in comparison to the millions spent in the county highways budget.
So I'd suggest that, and that's fine, then put together, one or two people want to go and make a presentation. I mean, it definitely needs that red light, because there's been too many near misses at that intersection. And I can remember 10 years ago, we made a presentation to county council saying we needed a full set of lights there, because there had been so many, near-death situations at that crossroads. And with what you're saying with, increased traffic, proposed development and things like that, I think the red light is sort of essential.
Okay. And that in talking to OPP officers, they say if it isn't reported, it's not an accident. They find in the reporting, there's more reported a month after the incident when the gentleman's agreement that they would cover each other's damages breaks down than there is in the accidents at the actual time.
With this flashing light, is it just a red light on the stop sign?
Yeah.
And I'd suggest it should be both ways.
Oh, yeah. Both sides.
Both sides of it.
Yes.
Because, I've seen 2 accidents at that corner, and they were from a person who was traveling west on Road 25, coming up to the intersection.
There's one on the county road coming up to 86 Highway, a diesel car diner. The old diesel car diner that flashes, and you can see it for almost 2 miles back, and you're aware that there is something ahead.
And just for council's information, one of the county highways weather stations is at the diesel car diner corner. There's a 360-degree camera that they can rotate it remotely to take pictures as to what the weather conditions are. But I will talk with County Roads Department on Wednesday then. They're part of last Wednesday's actual committee of the whole, but I will talk to them, right?
Yeah, I think we're asking for 2 different things here too. To be clarified, we're asking for speed reduction, we're asking for flashing stop lights. So I think this is why probably might get back, is to say, they can do the speed reduction like that, but they have their own studies at all their intersections for what goes up and what doesn't. How many accidents has been there, and, because they're having stoplights and everything that doesn't happen. So I think there's 2 things there. you read, Kelly?
Yeah, well, one of the questions from Mike was, why only one side of the highway and not the other side?
Yeah.
And I wasn't here for the last council meeting, so I really couldn't answer those questions, and I think that's why he asked for a delegation.
Delegation,
Not
exactly.
that that's the process that you'll have to do each and every time, was because the information just wasn't there.
I
Okay. Good. Dave?
If you need a delegation, I would be pleased to attend as part of the delegation.
Okay.
I will too.
Okay, that's it for Public Works, Planning and Development, the status of the review, plan of subdivision application. Gary, do you want to add anything or just answer?
Here comes Sally.
Oh, Sally's here.
That's been hiding in the closet.
I just come out of the woodwork. Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to provide, I think it's in your package, a copy of the correspondence that I've sent to the applicant of the Wingham Creek Developments Inc. subdivision proposal, and bringing you up to date on some of the other things that have happened since our public meeting back in September. So in October, I sent them this letter, and it was basically to really bring them and myself sort of to an understanding of where we're at, sort of a status of their application. And in it, I outlined some of the things that are still outstanding in my mind. So I'll give you those just quickly in summary. One of them was this reconciliation of the rate of the development that they're suggesting is possible, that they've estimated through their market research, and sort of more assurance that that research is on target with respect to the housing types that might be needed by this community. So that is linked to the speed at which it might be developed. So I asked them for some more input on that so that we can be confident about that rate. Housing in particular, I've asked for apartment blocks. They haven't provided any in the plan. And when I got looking really closely at the plan, it would be hard to fit them on a lot that has just depth for single detached dwelling. So it's important to incorporate those now and think about where they might be so that we're not trying to squeeze them into something later that really doesn't suit them. The other thing that has happened since that time and that we've been able to talk about, that's Weston's and myself, is affordable housing statistics that I've gotten from the Huron County Housing Authority. And in August, there was a considerable number of households on a wait list for affordable housing in the Wingham area. And so that information really helps us to figure out what is a reasonable target for housing. And since this development represents the vast majority of the residential development or the residential land base that's left, it's important that we accommodate that particular part of the community in the development. So they were very receptive to that, and they have, they'll probably accommodate some of that in the apartment blocks that I've talked about, but there's other forms of affordable housing too that they're going to consider. Because some of the price points in their market study just exceed what is considered affordable for this area. From a technical point of view, the groundwater monitoring continues to be a really important point for both North Huron staff and for the consulting engineer here, BM Ross. And the street pattern, Kelly put some input into the process about what street pattern improvements could be to improve connectivity and to help with snow removal. And so I put that forward to them as well. And I also suggested that, especially in phase 1, that they reorder some of the sub-phases, because the way they've proposed it runs us into a number of sort of dead ends for a long time if those sub-phases don't develop, you know, kind of year after year type of thing. So, and then from a design point of view, I've asked them to integrate some of their thoughts or planning around the trails that are that we've gotten a lot of public comment on. Parkland there's a couple larger park blocks that are proposed in the plan and stormwater management ponds, and how the three of those things might be linked or planned in such a way that they become true amenities and people places for this subdivision, because it's quite a big area, and we're going to need some places for people to meet up or to have recreational opportunities. So one of the final things that I put into that letter was that the county has the ability to have a peer review done on some of the aspects of an application at the expense of the applicant, and so the county made it known in this letter that they were going to go ahead with a peer review of the market research study. And they received the letter and they got back to me and said they received it and that they were going to be working towards some of the stuff in that letter. And I made it clear in the letter too that the whole point of sharing this kind of information back and forth is try to work together to come to a plan that better definitely suits the needs of the community, that the county and the township can be more comfortable and, you know, confident that in supporting it. So that's where we're at, and they seem to really appreciate that perspective. So following that, Bruce Potter and myself got together with North Huron staff and we reviewed where we're at with the studies, just to bring staff back up to speed again on the status of the application. And we talked about three major things. And these three things were also forwarded to the applicants. One of them was that there are two large park blocks, and one of them makes very good sense to save and to have available for active park space at some point when the township would like to develop it. But that we probably don't need two large active park spaces, and that one of them, the one that's sort of more in the middle of the subdivision, might be better spent as area that could be given out of lots to sort of have a more connected trail system that feels a little more natural. So that suggestion was made to them in hopes that they could come to some sort of new arrangement for a trail system that sort of better appeals to some of the public comments that we have on the trail. And the other thing was just those details that Kelly provided on the proposed street network, the amendments that he proposed, and then again, a reiteration that the groundwater data is so critical to being sure that especially phase 3 of the subdivision is appropriate, and that I think it has been questioned whether or not it's suitable for development. Well, it probably is, but if that groundwater data shows us something different, then we do really need to reconsider the layout. So it's just about being sure, and that groundwater data being really important. So they're about 6 months into, or 7 maybe months into monitoring groundwater data, and that it was recommended by their consultants and seconded by BMR that they do about 12 months, and MPCA that they do about 12 months of data collection. So the third thing that has happened since our public meeting is that I have contracted with Altus Group out of Toronto to do that market study, and they are very they're well geared to do this type of work, and the questions that they have asked me indicate to me that they understand very well what I'm asking them to do. So they haven't started yet, but they anticipate about 5 weeks or 4 weeks, between 4 and 5 weeks, to bring us a draft that we could then review and see if they've hit our target for what we asked for. And Westons are aware of that, and they are also have advised me last week that they're working on some revisions based on the feedback that they've got from us thus far. So they have suggested to Gary and I that we'll have some revisions to look at even as early as this week. And once we get those, then we'll schedule some time with them to go through the revisions and just see where we're at. So I just wanted you to know that there has been a lot of communication back and forth, and they do seem willing to make some changes to help us come a little closer to something that we're really comfortable and confident in for meeting the needs of Wingham. So I'm looking forward to their revisions, and we'll see what they come up with. And I can bring that back to you again for a bit of an update in maybe a month or so. Didn't any have any questions about the subdivision? Okay, well, my letter to them I think is in your package, but if you have questions about it, just let me know, because,
It's very well put together.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Okay.
Oh, nothing in new business? Okay, moving to council information. Points you might want to bring forward? Brock?
Yes, I was at, actually 3 meetings last week. I think there was minutes from the Blythe Advisory Board on your desk. And I'm sorry, the meeting was just last Wednesday. Am I on the right?
This is the 11 points in council information.
I'm sorry, I've done that again.
That you're just eager to get through this meeting.
I've got to get it's off my chest, yeah. Thanks, sorry.
Dave?
Item number 8, Patricia Hunking, the Blythe residents on public transportation. This lady came and visited me, and because there is the Canada Coach or the bus line that was running from London through to Owen Sound has ceased operation, and so there is no real public transportation now from London up number 4 highway through Blythe or Clinton and on to Wingham. And it is a concern because this particular lady does rely on public transportation to get to and from London to Blythe to visit her mother. I think it's something that we should forward to the county for consideration, because not only does it affect Blythe and North Huron, but it affects Clinton and Exeter and points beyond. And so I think it becomes somewhat of a county issue, but also probably should be taken to SWIA for their consideration, because transportation through the whole of southwestern Ontario is being affected with cancellation of bus service.
I wasn't able to attend it, but SWIA did have a meeting on Thursday that Brock was at, so that and that in the basically poverty study committee, the transportation was one of the big parts of it too, and also that the Owen Sound to London, a lot of times the bus ran over to Auburn and up the division between East and West Wawanosh for pickups for to take ones to London that were going down to Norwich, so that but unfortunately it's one of those things that unless you have so many passengers, they claim that as long as it's only private individuals running it, that maybe provincial government will have to make some additional monies available for, I'll say, transportation.
We have a possible solution coming out of that meeting.
Out of the meeting? At another time, or
Well,
how long will
whatever
it
you
take,
wish.
Brock?
Well, it's not a short report. I think it's all important. So it's up to you. Anyway.
5, 10, or 15?
He's only one person.
Well, we've proven tonight that we don't go by that anyway, so.
Well, I'm asking for,
Brevity.
to try and make a,
I'll make it as brief as I can.
Okay.
Yeah. This is a meeting set up by SWIA, the Southwest Economic Assembly. And transportation is one of the most important, most critical problems that we have in Huron County, as with most rural communities. And one of the complications is that we all have the experience of problematic issues, but there's a little difference in one community and another. They're not always the same problem, exactly. So in this instance, we were encouraged to do 5 things. Consider the needs of the entire region, not just our region. Consider all of the needs: health, education, work, culture, business, and tourism. To consider all kinds of transportation: rail, buses, highway transportation, bicycles, active transportation, and so on. And think urgently about the long run. That is, we need to look at it now. There's no point in waiting into the future, because it's going to take a long time probably to initiate anything. And engage in a collaborative effort, taking into account all of the viewpoints. So a lot of the time, as we've discussed this, it's usually the railway people who are concerned. It's the Stratford people who are getting lousy service from Via Rail, and that dominates the whole meeting, so we don't get into some of the other issues. There's a spokesman there from Bruce Power, as a matter of fact, and he's saying that Bruce Power is not just a power company, but it's a people company, and they are concerned because their employees need to get to work, and if they take their car to work, what does their family do? Does their family have another vehicle? So it's a matter of equity here. Gemma Mendes-Smith from the Workforce Planning Ontario talked about the low unemployment rate we have in this area, but mainly that's because a lot of people have given up, and particularly people who are in remote areas and don't have access to a vehicle. They're not even looking for work because they know they would have no way of getting to it. Youth unemployment is terrifically high, and one of the main barriers there is lack of mobility. Programs are out of reach. The government offers programs to help people for training and whatever. A lot of people can't get to them because of the transportation problem. Here's an interesting point that came up a few times: school bus transportation. Several people mentioned, why can't the school buses somehow be incorporated in this? And several people mentioned that they've tried to talk to their school boards, and they don't get much cooperation, which is not a big surprise here. I'll just take the rest of the time for the solution. Norwich, Ontario. A young man named Brad is the director of transportation services for Norwich County, or for Norfolk County, sorry, Norfolk County. And they have developed a bus service. They have one bus, one small bus, and it has regular routes from Monday to Friday, all around from town to town, and they offer rides at $6 a person for out of town and $2 for in-town services. They have a regular schedule. They keep adapting it. They keep statistics on the ridership, and they're up to about 25 to 30 rides a day. So they're not breaking even. And the point that comes up time and time again is this, that a public transit system never breaks even. And there's no way of even talking. It's a service, it's not a business. And so they feel that the economic advantage to this, people being able to get around for shopping, for medical purposes, for visiting, whatever, is well worth the time in terms of what it adds to quality of life. So if you want to check out their website, it's www.ridenorfolk.ca. They have a neat little website there. It's a very, very interesting experiment. It's a work in progress. They are thinking of eventually adding other buses, but they're taking a cautious approach, and so it's really worth. I think it's Brad Smith, by the way, is the name of the young man.
So, Brock, that's a county initiative, and all the towns participate, if I understand that from conversations with other people. So the county kind of took the lead and said, we'll buy the bus, but I believe all the towns.
They're set up as a separate board, and the funding comes from the county.
Yeah.
From both Alderman and Norfolk, by the way.
Is that right? Yeah.
And having attended their economic development meeting a couple of years ago, They do work well together, and a big part of their governance is from the county level.
Yeah, they took a survey to see how people were enjoying the service. And one of the complaints that they got was, a person said that Simcoe is too far from my town and the ride takes too long. So what's the solution to that?
Just another comment on the transportation. And a couple of years ago, I was talking to the director of health here in county and asked why, when we're sending buses from Clinton taking people to the hospital in London, for example, very often they're only taking one person and they have a 5 or 6 person bus. Why they couldn't offer seats to the public to help pay for the cost of the bus, and the answer I got was flat, can't do that. It's not in our mandate.
We had at this meeting, we had people representing the bus companies, like Greyhound had 2 representatives there, and there was another Great Western Transportation there, and they were in disagreement. Actually, they had a debate because they have different views on this. But one of the points that we come out with is that the process for getting a bus route and establishing it and then making any adjustments to it is horrendous. The red tape is miles and miles long, and it's very, very difficult to get through it. And of course, the other problem, that they can serve heavily used routes and make money on it, but they aren't a solution for the lady who wants to come from London to Blythe to and from work and family.
So, Your Worship, I'd ask that we send a letter back to the Hunkings about what steps we're going to send a note off to the county with regards to the issue of transportation, which is becoming a much more prevalent issue around not just